In this episode, we're going to make Linux feel much less intimidating by focusing on the small set of ideas that help new technicians get their bearings quickly. Many beginners hear Linux and imagine a screen full of text, a lot of unfamiliar words, and support work that is somehow harder than everything else. The truth is much simpler than that. Linux support starts with understanding where files live, who is allowed to use them, how software gets installed, and which basic commands help you answer simple questions about the system. Once those pieces make sense, Linux stops feeling like a strange world and starts feeling like a normal operating system, OS, with its own structure and habits. A beginner does not need to become an expert programmer to support Linux well. The first real goal is to move around the system with confidence, understand what you are looking at, and avoid creating problems by making changes before you understand what the system is actually telling you. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is part of our companion study series. The first book is a detailed study guide that explains the exam and helps you prepare for it with confidence. The second is a Kindle-only ebook with 1,000 flashcards you can use on your mobile device or Kindle for quick review. You can find both at Cyber.Me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A helpful way to begin is to remember that Linux is not one single product with one single look. It is a family of systems that can appear in different forms depending on the distribution, the desktop environment, and the purpose of the machine. One Linux computer may look polished and simple on the desktop, while another may be used mostly through a command line interface, CLI. That difference can make beginners feel like they are learning many systems at once, but the basic support logic stays the same. Files still live somewhere, users still need permission, software still has to come from somewhere, and technicians still need a way to inspect the health of the machine. That is why Linux becomes easier once you stop judging it by appearance alone. Whether a user works through a graphical user interface, GUI, or ACLI, the technician still needs to understand the same foundation. The tools may look different, but the main support questions are still about location, access, software, and system behavior. One of the most important beginner ideas is that Linux uses one connected file system tree that starts at the root directory, shown as a slash. Instead of thinking about many separate drive letters the way some users do on other systems, Linux presents storage in a more unified way. Everything grows outward from that starting point, and different folders inside that tree have different roles. The home area is where normal users keep much of their personal work. The etc. area is often where important system configuration files live. The var area often holds changing data such as logs and other active system information, while tmp is for temporary files and usr contains many programs and supporting files the system uses every day. A beginner does not need to memorize every folder right away, but it helps a lot to know that Linux organizes the system by purpose. If you know the tree has a structure and that important areas tend to hold certain kinds of content, the system starts to feel logical instead of random. Paths matter a great deal in Linux because a technician is often telling the system exactly where to look. A full path begins from the root and names each step along the way, while a relative path begins from where you already are. That sounds small, but it affects nearly every support task. Linux is also usually case-sensitive, which means a file name with one capital letter is not always the same as a file name with all lowercase letters. That can confuse beginners because the path may look almost right and still fail. Hidden files are another common surprise. In Linux, many hidden files and hidden folders begin with a period, so they are easy to miss unless the technician knows to look for them. This matters because user settings, configuration details, and application data may be stored in places that do not stand out at first glance. Good Linux support often begins with path awareness, careful reading, and the simple habit of not assuming two names are the same just because they look close. Another beginner lesson is that Linux cares less about file extensions than many people expect. A file can still have an extension, but the extension is not always the main way the system decides what something is or how it should behave. That matters because beginners sometimes look for familiar patterns and assume they are lost when the names do not look the way they expect. Linux also uses the idea that many things can be treated like files, including configuration data, devices, and streams of information the system is working with. You do not need to dive deeply into that idea on day one, but it helps explain why Linux support often involves looking at plain text files, configuration files, and log files rather than only clicking through visual settings. This is part of what makes Linux powerful and also part of what can make it feel unfamiliar. The system often reveals itself in text, and technicians get better results when they become comfortable reading that text instead of waiting for every answer to appear in a settings window. Permissions are one of the most important Linux topics because they answer a question that comes up in support all the time. Who is allowed to do what with this file or folder? At the simplest level, Linux permissions are built around read, write, and execute. Read means the user can view the contents. Write means the user can change or remove the contents. Execute means something can be run, or in the case of a directory, that the user can move through it in a useful way. These ideas matter because many Linux problems that look like missing files, broken apps, or failed updates are really permission problems underneath. A user may be able to see a file, but not change it. A script may exist, but not run because it is missing execute permission. A folder may be present, but still not be usable the way the technician expects. Once beginners understand that permissions control behavior very directly, many Linux errors stop feeling mysterious and start feeling like access questions. Linux also sorts permissions by three audiences, which are the owner, the group, and everyone else. The owner is usually the main user or process associated with the file. The group provides a way to share access across a selected set of users. Everyone else means other users on the system who do not fall into the first two categories. This model is very useful because it gives Linux a clean way to allow shared work without making everything open to everyone. It also explains why a file can work perfectly for one user and fail completely for another user on the same machine. Beginners improve quickly when they stop asking whether the file exists and start asking whether the right user has the right permission. Commands such as chmod and chown matter here because they help change permission and ownership settings, but the deeper lesson is more important than the command names. Support gets safer and faster when you understand that Linux is always checking who is asking, what they are asking for, and whether the file or folder allows it. At this point, it is important to separate the root directory from the root user, because beginners often hear the word root in both places and assume it means the same thing. The root directory is simply the top of the file system tree. The root user is the highly privileged account that can make very powerful system changes. That distinction matters because Linux is designed so that ordinary work does not always happen with full system power. This is a good thing. It helps reduce accidental damage and makes the system safer to support. A command such as sudo is important because it allows a permitted user to perform an administrative action when needed without living in a highly privileged state all the time. For beginners, the big lesson is not just that sudo exists. It is that good Linux support uses elevated power carefully. If you make every change with full system power before you understand the situation, you increase the chance of turning a small support issue into a much larger one. Once the permission model starts to make sense, the basic navigation commands become much easier to understand because they answer very practical questions. The command pwd answers where am I right now. The command ls answers what is here. The command cd answers how do I move to another place. These may sound almost too simple, but they are the foundation of calm Linux work because technicians often fail when they act in the wrong folder rather than when they use the wrong idea. If you do not know where you are and what is present, every next step becomes less trustworthy. Viewing tools such as cat and less also matter because Linux often stores useful information in readable text files. That can include configuration details, log content, and other clues about what the system is trying to do. Beginners do not need to feel rushed here. Linux becomes friendlier the moment you understand that basic navigation is really just a conversation about location, contents, and movement through the file system. File handling commands build on that same logic. Commands such as cp, mv, rm, mkdir, and touch answer practical questions about copying, moving, removing, creating folders, and creating files. The reason these commands matter in support work is not that they look technical. They matter because technicians constantly need to verify that something was copied, move a file into the right place, create a directory for a task, or remove an item that is no longer needed. Linux can be very direct about these actions, and that directness is helpful when you know exactly what you are doing. It also means care is important. Beginners should not assume there is always a friendly safety net behind every removal or move operation. Good habits matter a lot here. Check your location, check the file name, understand the path, and then make one clear change at a time. The commands themselves are not the real challenge. The real challenge is staying aware of exactly which file and which folder you are acting on before you tell the system to proceed. Package management is another area that becomes much easier when you see the big idea first. On Linux, software is often installed, updated, and removed through a package manager instead of by downloading random installers from many different places. That is a major strength because it helps the system keep track of what is installed, what other software it depends on, and how updates should be handled. A package manager also helps the technician work from trusted software sources rather than guessing whether a random download is safe or appropriate. Different Linux distributions often use different package tools, so one system may use apt while another may use DNF, yum, or zipper. That variety can worry beginners, but the main concept is the same across systems. The package manager is the organized way the OS handles software. If you understand that role, the different names become much less scary because they are solving the same basic support problem in slightly different ways. This matters in real support because software problems often come down to version, source, and dependency. A user may say an application will not install, broke after an update, or is missing a component it needs. The package manager helps the technician think through those questions in a more controlled way. Instead of treating every program like an isolated item, Linux often treats software as part of a larger managed system. That means updates can be more consistent and installed software can be tracked more clearly, but it also means technicians need to respect the package model. Pulling software from the wrong place or mixing methods carelessly can create confusion later. For beginners, the support lesson is simple. Use the package tools that fit the distribution. Understand that software may rely on other packages underneath, and remember that staying organized with software sources reduces support trouble later. Good package habits make Linux easier to maintain because the system knows more about what is present and how it is supposed to fit together. Basic administrative commands also help technicians answer system health questions without guessing. A command such as whoami tells you which user account is active, which is useful when permission problems do not make sense at first. Commands such as ps and top help reveal what processes are running and which ones seem busy or stuck. Commands such as df and do help answer storage questions by showing how much space is available and where space is being used. Another very practical tool is man, which helps the technician learn what a command is for and what options it supports. These tools matter because Linux often gives very clear answers when you ask the right question. If the machine feels slow, look at what is running. If storage seems full, look at space use. If a permission decision seems odd, confirm which user you really are. That is how Linux support becomes manageable. You stop treating the whole machine as one large mystery and start checking one clear system fact at a time. A simple support example shows how these basics fit together. Imagine a user says they cannot open a file, an application update failed, and the system is warning about low space. A beginner technician does not need a dramatic rescue plan. The first step is to find the file and confirm the path. The next step is to check which user is active and whether the file permissions make sense for that user. Then the technician may need to check available storage and look at where space is being consumed. If software is part of the issue, the package manager becomes relevant because the problem may involve an incomplete update, a missing dependency, or a package source issue rather than a broken application in isolation. None of these steps is magical. They are just comm checks built on the basic Linux ideas of location, identity, access, storage, and software management. That is what makes Linux support more approachable. The system usually gives clues, but the technician has to know which simple question to ask first. One common beginner mistake is trying to memorize Linux as a giant dictionary of commands instead of understanding what problem each command helps solve. Another is assuming that if the desktop looks different, the support logic must be completely different too. In reality, the strongest Linux habit is not typing faster. It is thinking more clearly. Where am I? What file is this? Who owns it? Who can use it? How was this software installed? And what is the system reporting right now are much better support questions than why is Linux being weird. That difference in thinking is what helps a beginner grow. Linux often rewards careful reading, patience, and respect for the system structure. When you slow down and connect files, permissions, packages, and basic administrative commands into one mental model, the platform stops feeling harsh and starts feeling very consistent. That consistency is one of Linux's biggest strengths once you learn how to see it. By the end of this episode, the main point should feel clear. Linux support begins with understanding the file system tree, the path you are working in, and the fact that the system organizes files by purpose rather than by random chance. Permissions matter because Linux checks read, write, and execute access for the owner, the group, and everyone else. Root power matters, but it should be used carefully and not treated like the normal state for every task. Basic commands such as pwd, ls, cd, cp, mv, rm, dir, cat, and less help technicians move through the system and work with files confidently. Package managers matter because they give Linux an organized way to install, update, and remove software. Administrative tools such as Huami, PS, Top, DF, Do, and Man help answer everyday support questions with real evidence. When beginners learn these basics as connected support habits, Linux becomes far less intimidating and far more understandable.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.